No, it's a USB-C. There is Wi-Fi, satellite, right?
Satellite, and then that's no moon is the password.
I'm sorry?
That's no moon, all one word.
That's no moon.
It's a shark.
I did that before.
Here. You said you had like an interview thing?
Yeah, I've done, I can talk on tech interviews, I'll let David go first.
Okay.
I know we've met Karen.
Ryan.
That's Kasky.
It's me, yeah, that's me.
I know David.
I don't know anyone. Stop.
So if you want me to go first, I can share my screen and
Go for it.
all right. Let me add Zoom and share my screen. Share. And this one. Share. All right. Everybody see this okay? Yep. All right. Let's go ahead and start. So this is basically pulled from a presentation that I did for the JAX Use group last month. And so I have a Google or the advertisement here for JAX nodes. So I'm always looking for speakers for my user group as well. I'm also looking for like a permanent meeting space. Somebody from HashRocket was kind enough to reach out to me and volunteer. So I think we may have something lined up for August with another location, but I think we're going to try to meet here in September. So that's the plan for right now. So quick a little bit about me. As I mentioned before, I run the JAX user group. Currently an application architect for a company called Pragmatic Works. I've done a lot of different languages, everything from Objective-C to TypeScript. I have a blog where I blog about this stuff. I also have a YouTube channel and a GitHub page that I've got listed here. And then I have two handles that I typically use on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, JAXNode and Polyglot Engine 1. So let's talk a little about large language models. So I think most people became aware of large language models about 3 years ago when ChatGPT was originally released. So the original GPT that came out before 3.5, the GPT as far back as GPT-2 actually only had about 500 lines of code in it. And so people I think are shocked when they initially hear that. But the thing is, you know, the real power of GPT is in the training model that they use. And so, you know, today's large language models are actually much better than that, but they still have a lot of limitations. And, you know, OpenAI was the first company that added tool support and tool calling. And now there's a total arms race to try to get to, I don't think they're even calling it AGI anymore. I think they're calling it artificial search.
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
This to me is discussed.
You just gotta mute.
There you go. All right. So most
It still needs a mute.
I know, I'm working on it. Sorry, guys.
no problem.
There you go.
So the existing large language models that are out there now are essentially trained on all the text that's on the internet. And most of these models are generally trained to a certain date. So in a lot of cases, the data is actually stale. Like if you go to, you know, ChatGPT as an example, Anthropic, it's like they tend to have all their training data and they train to like a certain date, and then the data in the models is really only good for up to that date. If something new has happened since then, it's not going to have it in the model. So, most of these models can be improved by using something called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. You've probably heard of RAG applications, which essentially all it's doing is it's when you are going to prompt, either let's say a chatbot or some other type of application, what it's actually doing is it's going out and it's doing a search, getting relevant information, and then passing that into the prompt that is then giving you the answer. And so that's the way that a lot of these large language models in the past have been improved. But there's still things that they're not good at. So I think the classic example is math. Most large language models are really bad at math, as an example. And then anybody that's tried, as I hold my hands up with quotes, vibe coding, they've probably noticed that there's a lot of flaws. We're not quite at the point where we can replace all software engineers. So OpenAI was formed from an open source initiative. There would be an open source alternative to Google. Google published a paper in 2017 called "Attention is All You Need." And OpenAI researchers read this paper and then started building GPT. And so all this stuff is really based off of that original paper. And so then OpenAI famously went closed source, and the rest is history. So that brings me to the subject of MCPs tonight. And so I decided to title this talk that "Context is All You Need" from the "Attention is All You Need" paper. So what exactly is the Model Context Protocol? So these MCP agents, essentially, it's a protocol that was defined by Anthropic back in November of last year. So this stuff is really still pretty new. It's not even a year old at this point. But it defines standards for AI agents. And this can be implemented in any platform and any programming language. So just as an example for tonight, a lot of the examples I'm going to be showing are actually JavaScript based. But you can do this in C#, you can do this in Ruby. In fact, I have an example that I wrote in Ruby specifically for this user group tonight. So we'll get a chance to take a look at that. MCPs can be called by generative AI for additional context. And so that's kind of the key thing here, is that they're essentially used as a way of being able to provide additional context to a large language model. So who's using MCPs? So like I said before, this was originally developed by Anthropic. And so if you're using Claude Desktop as an example, you can register an MCP in Claude Desktop, and then it'll have access to that. And I'll cite some examples of where that might be handy here a little bit later. It can also be used with the Windsurf and Cursor AI IDs. It was recently added into VS Code, so now you can add MCPs into Visual Studio Code. I happen to use a terminal called Warp, which is an AI-based terminal. It also, you can add MCPs into Warp as well. So why do we need these MCPs? So as I said before, with models, they're only as good as the data that's trained on. And so MCPs essentially provide that additional context that you need. So recent changes allow for prompts to search for the internet, but most of the frontier models allow for tool calling now. So tool calling is something that's fairly new. This was added, I think, last year by OpenAI. And initially, they supported this by using the OpenAPI schema, which if anybody that's used Swagger, as an example, it's just additional stuff added into Swagger. Anthropic also supports tool calling. Llama 3.2 supports tool calling. Cohere does. Mistral AI. There's a number of different either open models or frontier models that all support tool calling now. And more importantly, OpenAI actually now officially supports MCP as well. So it's actually kind of nice. So
What is tool calling?
Tool calling essentially is the ability of the large language model to access an API to get additional data back. And I'll show an example of how that works here in a second.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, good. So MCP, the core architecture, is a client-server model. All the AI applications can connect to MCP servers over either a JSON RPC endpoint or either over a server-side events that should be streaming. You can also access them locally using standard I/O. And all requests are supposed to be stateless. So this is kind of a simple model of how it works. So if you look at the left side of this this illustration, you can see that they've got the MCP client, the cloud IDE tools, and then it's using the protocol specifically to speak to these different MCP servers. And the first two on top are accessing like a local data source, but then there's another one at the bottom that's accessing like a remote service call. But the idea is the same. It's like you're just talking to these different MCP servers, and then how they get their information is really no matter to you. It's something that by providing this interface, it creates an abstraction where we don't have to worry about the details of where the data sits or how it's being accessed. So some of the future directions here is there's some other protocols. There's something that's called the Agent Communication Protocol. Google recently announced the agent-to-agent protocol, which is essentially what it sounds like. It's different agents calling and talking to other agents. There's actually official standardization and governance that's also coming to MCPs and some of these other protocols. And there's actually several decentralized marketplaces. So if you're looking for an MCP that you can use in your application or your large language model, MCP.so, Smithereed.ai, Llama.ai are some of the places you can go to look these up. As far as language supports goes, like I said before, this is pretty much supported by everybody now. So there's a C# SDK, there's a Kotlin SDK. The ones, the Fred on the top here are all, I think, officially supported by Anthropic. But people that are using other languages are going out and they're adding MCP. So for instance, there's a Swift MCP support that you get that's non-directly from Anthropic. And the one I'm going to be using tonight, there's a RubyJax 4. So if you want to use it for creating something for like a Rails app, for example, you can do that as well. So this is kind of a quick example in Ruby how you can construct an MCP server. So if you look at this, it's just has a constructor here where you pass a name, version, and then what resources you're using. And then you can define tools for that server object. And so this one's pretty simple. This is kind of like a hello world type of example, but you can see here that they have definitions for the schema, what the schema is supposed to look like, and also what the response is supposed to look like as well. And then they just define the transport here at the end. In this case, this is an example of a standard I/O transport. So as far as the defining parts of MCPs, there's a server, there's resources that you can define for the server, there's tools that you can define for the server, and there's also prompts. So if you have like a templated prompt you want to be able to use, this is something that's very common for people that are doing AI development. It's like instead of just relying on a prompt that's provided by the user, they'll add their own additional context to the prompt. So you can do the same thing with MCPs. You can define custom prompts and then be able to reuse those with the MCP server. And then as far as testing goes, there's actually a open source MCP inspector that's part of the protocol. It's node-based. And it provides a standard web interface for basically testing your MCPs. And if you're using server-based, you can also use a tool like CRUL or one of the other main REST testing things for testing your endpoints. So let me go ahead and do a quick demo. So like I said before, I am using Warp here. And I'm going to come over here, and I have this example I used from last month. I'm going to go ahead and open this up just so we can see what I've got in here. And so, can everybody read that okay? I can blow the type up a little bit so it's easier to read. Yeah, let me blow that up a little bit. That should be a little bit easier to read now. Okay. So I have in here, I've got essentially three different examples. So I have a very simple example in here that's a standard I/O example. And if we take a look at this, what this is actually doing here is I have defined an MCP server that is a aviation weather server. And so one of the examples that you see online, a lot of them, somebody's trying to implement an MCP is to build a weather, MCP. But since I'm a pilot, I kind of want to have, information that's more specific to me. So I do have an API that I am hosting in my web server that goes out and retrieves MEDAR reports and also TAPs from the aviation weather website. And so I've got one here for getting the current weather at any ICAO location, but I also have one here for essentially getting the forecast as well. And then I have an example here using LangChain. LangChain is a framework for creating agents. And what this is actually doing here is that it's creating a client to that to the example I just showed that was written in Node. And then what it's doing is it's going out and creating a connection, and then it's loading that up as a MCP tool, right? So I'm using this method here called load MCP tools. And then I'm using this function here called crack react agent. And what it's actually doing is it's going out and it's taking the model and it's taking the tools and combining them together. So now, if I go to invoke this, not only do I have access to the large language model, in this case I'm using OpenAI for the large language model, but it also has access to the tools. So in the example here, I'm asking what is the current aviation weather for KGAX? That's the ICAO identifier for Jacksonville International Airport. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to try to run this. Let's see what happens. Aha! Okay, so we got an answer back. So it did come back here. I don't know if everybody can read this okay, but in the content here, it came back and it gave me like the altimeter setting, what the cloud levels are like, all the different information, the temperature in Celsius. What's your European, it's really current titles. So for the other part of the example here, I also had a chat server that I created that's actually using a MCP server that's actually using the other method. Outside of Standard I/O, you can actually host essentially as a through HTTP for doing HTTP streaming. So I'm going to go ahead and run that example. So I'm right here, hit dev, and I'm actually spinning up an Express site, and I'm also spinning up a Next.js site. So if I come here and open this up in my browser, we can see here I've got the Jax Node chatbot up here. And so I'm just going to ask it a question. Ask like, what is the current aviation weather at Craig Airport in Jacksonville, Florida, right? So what should happen is it should come back and tell us that it doesn't really have that available in its context. So at the current moment, I'm unable to provide that real-time data. And it gives me some advice about where I can go out and find that data, and it even gives me an example of what that report might look like. So that's really no good to us. But what I've done here is I have this tab here, which actually has a tool that I configured using MCP. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to ask the same question again to this new chatbot. And now you'll see there's a little bit of a delay, but it's actually coming back and giving me the current weather at Craig, which is just down the road over here. And so it's giving me the dew point, the temperature, the sky conditions, and the altimeter. And it's telling me that the visual flight rules, which means that I don't have to have an engine rating in order to be able to fly out here. So that is kind of an example of what you can do with by just adding an MCP in here. So the last part of this, I'm just going to show a quick example here of what this actually looks like if you're using Ruby instead. So I'm going to come over here and let's open this up. And so I have this Ruby application that I've created here. And if you look at this, you can see that essentially this is the same tool as I wrote before in JavaScript, but I just rewrote it in Ruby. And you can see the same thing. I have a schema here that I've defined. And then I also have a call here that it's making. And this is calling the same web service that I provided. And it's getting a response back. And then I'm just taking the response and I'm converting it to a string and then outputting that back out. And there's even an example here of a prompt as well as some resources in here. So in order to be able to test this, what I'm going to do is come back here to my terminal. For whatever reason, I could not get this to work with the NPM scripts in Visual Studio Code, but I have been able to get it to work with just using the command line. So if we come here and we run this from the command line, this is actually going to pull up the MCP inspector. So this is what you would use to test, an MCP written in any language. In this case, it is actually written in Ruby. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type connect, and it's initializing. And so I can come over here, I can list resources. There's a test resource you can see over here. But more importantly, I've got these tools, right? So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to tell it to list tools, and we can see that we've got this aviation weather tool, which I saw in the code example here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put in an airport. Let's put in a different airport. Let's try KEQQ. That's L. And sure enough, this is pulling back I believe that's Cecil Field. So this is pulling back the weather information there for Cecil Field. So this can actually be, you can assign this to this MCP right now. If I wanted to, I can assign it to warp, I can assign it to VS Code. Why do you need the current weather for IDE? I have no idea. But where this stuff is really being used is, it's a good use case is, let's say you're working with the database, right? Well, a large language model is not going to know the table names, the column names, what columns are in which table, inside of a database. But there's a lot of different MCPs that you can use where you can point to your database, as an example, and it'll provide all that context into the large language model. So one of the things that a lot of these large models are already pretty good at is actually writing SQL queries, for example. So you can actually have it write your SQL queries if you're not already using Active Record or something like that with your applications. So we come back here to the slides.
Sounds like it's becoming much more important to lock down those information tables.
Yeah.
Because now anybody could theoretically do that without even knowledge of SQL.
Well, the key thing there is that you have to have like an account that has access to that. But I mean, it's something I don't think people who try to write for think about that. But I have a QR code here that has the original presentation here. I have the original presentation is actually up on YouTube, so if you want to watch the full presentation, it's up there. You can watch it on YouTube. And then I just have one more quick example here, just to show the power of AI. I've showed this video, I don't know how many times. I'm going to turn this off. I've showed that video, I don't know how many times with my cat, I'm still not able to get my cat to jump into any body of water. But it's all those GPUs out there churning as hard and fast as they can. It's just one of the important developments that have been created by artificial intelligence.
You see the one with the kids working at McDonald's?
No.
Look at this. AI cats at McDonald's. It's funny. Dogs.
That would switch from one word to the other.
Yes. I don't want to alienate any of the dog lovers, so you got dogs diving into a pool, just like the cats.
So the dogs get medals though.
Yes, well, they are dogs. So. All right, well, that's it for my presentation. Hope I didn't go too long on that.
I have one quick question. So in your example of an airport API, does that get hit on every prompt, or is it like preloaded when you load up your MCP servers?
So what it does do is it takes the definition for the tool and loads that up into the connection that you have with the large language model. So essentially, this bit of information that's supplied to the large language model when you're making the connection. But after that, as you're going through, and let's say if you're using a chatbot as an example, where you're just going back and forth about a conversation, it's smart enough to know, okay, this user has just asked me for, they need to have the weather information at Craig. So it's smart enough to go KCRG, pass it into the tool, get the response back, and then it's able to use that in its response. So essentially it's added to the context. But it's actually the large language model that is making that request. So
That's cool. So it knows it has that information at its disposal. It'll make a decision whether or not to actually reach out to it.
yes. And so one of the things you do have to be careful with is that you don't want to overdo it. Like you don't want to give it like, let's say, 500,000 tool definitions, because then it's not going to know which one to call. And again, they'll get confused. But if I think with specific use cases, like for instance, like if you're trying to do something that's maybe the insurance industry, where you're trying to look up specific information, I think this is a perfectly fine application for doing that.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Not so much a question as it is a comment, but I've noticed that creatives absolutely despise AI, even as an assistance tool. Like, I'm a video game enthusiast and creator, developer. There you go. And more than one, I'd say the majority of the Discord servers I'm on that are for making games, either look down on or disallow the use of AI in projects. And the general vibe I get from them is, if you use AI in your projects, you're not a real creative.
So I had this conversation with my nephew about this. So my nephew is a college student, and I was asking him, like, hey, are any of your classmates using ChatGPT to write their papers and stuff like that? And he said, oh yes, they're starting to look out for that. But it's like, I would never do that, because it's completely like, it's cheating, from his standpoint. But I know a lot of one of the things people have done is they have completely copied the style of like another artist. And there are some artists and stuff that they're trying to do something where, it's like, if you're going to do something, people are going and say, yeah, I'm just going to do this in the style of this artist. Now I don't have to go and pay that artist to do it in that style. So a perfect example of that would be the pop artist Andy Warhol. So Andy Warhol, famously, one of the things people would come to him to do is he had that famous portrait of Marilyn Monroe, where she did like 4 different squares and did these different squares, different colors, and stuff like that. So like all these like CEOs, these search companies and stuff would come to him and say, hey, can you do one of those with me? And so it's like, with the AI, you can just ask the AI to do that. You don't need Andy Warhol to do that.
I
So
mean, to be fair, you didn't need Andy Warhol to do it before.
that's
You just needed an artist that knew that style
That's true.
and could emulate it.
But importantly, the people that would buy that, those works of art from Andy Warhol brag and say, I actually got this from Andy Warhol.
Right.
That sounds like a bit of a attribution problem. Like, you made a piece of art, then for AI, you'd be like, I made this now. It's like, did you have that artist do it, or did the AI do it?
I think the thing, I'm not really so much worried about like the copyright infringement aspects. I mean, there's definitely things that are going to be hammered out as far as like the ethics and legality of doing stuff like that. I'm more worried about the HAL 9000 problem. Like, I don't want the feeder to come and say, it's like, Dave, I'm not opening the 5 bay doors for you, because there's too much of a chance that you'll kill the mission. So,
And I mean, being a Dave yourself,
Exactly.
it seems like you're like,
I
what are
noticed
you
that.
doing, Dave?
Exactly, I noticed that when I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I'm a little bit more concerned about that than I am the Arrow.
I think that you do have, like, I don't like vibe coding. And I don't like vibe coders. Not because they're gonna steal anything from us, from real developers or anything, but because they pass it off as real work. When it's gonna be full of security holes, it's gonna be full of, like, yeah, you could do vibe coding to make an app. But it's not gonna be robust. It's not gonna be.
Is it going to scale and is it going to last a while?
Exactly. And to some extent, to uninformed people, it looks like they've built something great in no time at all. And I think that's why we have so many people right now saying, oh, AI is going to take over all of the coding jobs. And it's like, we all know that's not true.
I think this is actually a huge opportunity for companies like HashRocket, because I think one of the things that, one reason why HashRocket, became such an important company in the Ruby on Rails community is because Ruby on Rails became like really popular really fast, like 20 years ago. It's like I remember it was like fully like hyped up. So a lot of people that didn't have any experience building web applications started trying to, I'm going to just build this in Ruby on Rails. And so they go through like the tutorials and stuff like that. So it's how you do a blog. And they start building out like web applications, but they really didn't know what they were doing. And so they would come to companies to like HashRocket, and HashRocket would fix it for them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Like you probably create like, this would be a good idea, register the domain name fixed vibe coding applications or something like that. And then you have a whole business where you basically go and fix people's vibe coding mistakes.
We're just at RailsConf, and that's the general sentiment is, yes, you can get from nothing to something quickly, even by yourself, like you could with Rails. But when you take that and get funding, the majority of it has to be rewritten because it won't work in its current state.
Yeah.
So that is what we're seeing.
I mean, there are some things that AI is actually really good at, like writing unit tests for you. As long as you go through and review that all of the edge cases are taken care of and things like that.
Very good 50-50 experience with that one.
I've had some that generate really, really well, and I read through and it's like, that's 80% of exactly what I would have written. And some of them, it's like, you don't even know what the heck you're doing.
If it has examples, it does better.
Yeah.
And you say like, you just tell it, hey, here's my code, write a test.
Yeah.
And I was doing something in a toy app. It's like, hey, can you write tests for this UI? And like 60% of the tests were testing styles and not testing functionality.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, and they go back, it's like, no, actually just test the functionality.
Right.
And then by the time I was done, I ended up writing most of it myself anyway.
Yeah. I had just today, I I wrote a couple of date formatting property wrappers in Swift, and it generated, and Copilot generated a couple of great unit tests for both of those. They needed a little few, but mostly it was pretty good. But we've also had other things where I've asked it to create unit tests for, a network call or something. It doesn't know our network stack, and it doesn't know all of that. It was useless.
So this is an example of doing something in the style of, there's a picture, we were talking about Jaws earlier. There's a famous picture of Steven Spielberg sitting in the mouth of Bruce the shark. And this is an illustration that I made using OpenAI's new image creation tool, where I said, hey, I'd like to see like a cartoon version of this picture. And I took the original picture of Spielberg sitting in the mouth of Jaws, right, to make this, and so this is now my desktop. I don't know who this is to check to. So.
Do we have other people who wanted to present?
I can, but it sounds like you've got something.
I mean, I work.
You're already connected.
All right.
Let's see.
Find my, oh.
So should I have my mic on, or does that?
Yeah, it'll pick up
Okay,
here.
so
so
just
just
that,
so
okay.
Let me see.
Are you done with that?
Yeah. All right. So this was a full-length presentation, like a half-hour, 45-minute presentation. I'll go through it quickly, but basically it's about doing well in your technical interview. So, a little about me. I'm a principal consultant now, rather than senior staff, but I'm a principal consultant at Calibrity, which is a consulting agency out of Cincinnati. We've got 25 years of professional development in full stack development and Swift. I've also been an adjunct professor at Purdue University. I was a boot camp instructor at Tech Elevator in Cincinnati, Ohio. Through all of that, I've done lots and lots of real and mock technical interviews. So the first thing we want to look at is what's the purpose of a technical interview. First of all, the interviewer basically cares about three things. And I am open to anybody's feedback here. If you guys do hiring, I would love any feedback if you guys disagree with any of this. But generally, the interviewer only cares about three things. They want to know, can you do the job? Will you complement the existing team? And how much extra effort will the existing team need to do to support you? It's not whether there's going to be extra effort needed. It's how much is going to be needed, at least for a period of time. Also, if you're a junior dev or something, if you're just entering the workforce, recognize that everyone that is hiring you knows that there's going to be work to train. You're not going to be expected to know everything on day one, so don't try. But it's really how much extra effort is going to be needed to support you. Also keep in mind that interviews aren't just one way. It's not just to say, are you a good fit for the company, but it's also, is the company a good fit for you? The company doesn't want to hire you and have you be unhappy any more than you want to join a company that makes you unhappy. So come prepared with questions. Some of them can and should be technical questions. Ask about their tech stack. Ask about what some of the biggest challenges they've had technologically. Things like that. You could ask to talk with someone that you'll be working with if you want. Usually that's after the second interview or so. They might say no.
but you can always ask. And you should come with at least 2 to 3 prepared questions about the position or the company that is not about compensation or benefits. Doesn't mean that compensation and benefits aren't important conversations to have. Depending on the company, you might talk about that in the first interview, or you might talk about it in the fourth interview. But there's going to be a time to talk about compensation and benefits, but it's not usually in the first interview. And frequently it's not in the technical interview. It's more in the HR interview. So the first thing is, can you do the job? This is the technical part of the technical interview. Don't be afraid to say that you don't know something. To understand what you do know, the interviewer may need to determine what you don't know. Like, what is the limit of what you know about a specific topic? It means they're going to ask some questions that they expect you to know the answer to, and that they don't expect you to know the answer to. And we all know that nobody knows everything. I have talked to people who have been developers for 10, 15 years, that if you use a specific acronym, they don't know what you're talking about. I didn't actually encounter the term tech debt until I'd been a programmer for 18 years. Like, I knew about it. I knew the concept of tech debt, but nobody ever called it tech debt where I happened to work. So, so if somebody asks you about tech debt and you've never heard that term, just say, that's a term I'm not familiar with. Could you tell me a little more about that? And if they define it for you, then you can be like, oh yeah, I know what that's about. That's talking about maintainability and things like that. We've really focused on that in this project and this project. I know how to make that happen. Especially if you're applying to a junior position, don't worry so much about what you don't know. It's better to say that you don't know the answer to something than to BS your way through an interview, because we as interviewers know if you're BSing your way through it. And we'll give you enough rope to hang yourself sometimes. And how you answer that question you don't know is just as important as how you answer a question you do know. Are you curious about it? Are you asking for more information? Are you clarifying the question to make sure you understand it? Things like that. Will you complement the existing team? That's big point number 2. There's lots of non-technical reasons the person may not be a good fit for a team. So just because you're not selected for a job doesn't necessarily mean you don't have the technical chops to do it. It might mean you don't have the technical chops, or somebody else was better technically than you were. But it may just be that they have enough really introverted people and they need somebody extroverted because they got to have somebody that's going to go talk to the clients, or the other way around. They have too many people that are really extroverted, that are talking to everybody, and they need somebody that can sit at their desk, not worry about all of the people, and get some stuff done. So it's not always about technical stuff. And a quote here, managers hire based on technical skills, but fire based on attitude. I actually disagree with that in many cases. I would 100% rather have a mediocre, trainable, somebody who is technically mediocre and trainable than somebody who is a technical rock star who won't listen and won't learn and thinks they're all that. And we're finding more and more companies care a lot more about whether you're going to be a team player than are you the technical rock star. So you want to be trainable and curious. And anybody feel free to jump in if you have any questions or comments. There are some questions that they can't ask. I'm not an HR professional, so you have to kind of take all of this with a grain of salt. But they can't ask questions about your age, marital status, number of children, race, gender, religious beliefs, disability status, or unemployment status. So bad questions. Things like, do you plan on having children in the future? Do you Do you need to take a lot of time off for your family? Things like that, they can't ask that. Do you attend a local church? Can't ask that. They actually can't ask if you're a US citizen. They can ask if you are authorized to work in the US. So those are two different questions, but there's an important distinction there. Things like, tell me how you got that scar. Probably not a good question. So just be aware and know your rights as somebody who's being interviewed. You don't have to answer every single question they get, especially they ask, especially if they're asking some of these questions they're not allowed to. Now, keep in mind that just because they can't ask those questions doesn't mean you can't offer some of that information if you think it will help you in the interview process. An example here, they can't ask about age, right? They can't ask you if you're going to retire in 2 years. But if you're older and you're concerned that they don't want to hire you because they think you're going to retire in the next 5 years, bring up what your 5, 10, or 20-year plans are. You know, if you're not planning to retire anytime soon, but you're 55, then it's perfectly all right for you to bring up. You're really excited about programming for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? I mean, my dad's 70 or so, and he still works, you know, in a professional job. So lots of people do that. Some interviewers, and there's some question about this within the HR community, but some interviewers will say that if you bring something up, then they can ask about it. I don't believe that that's true. It's probably some legal gray area, but some interviewers will look at it that way. Most HR professionals that I've talked about say, we're just not gonna touch that even if you bring it up. But it's good. It's good to know that if you want to bring some of this stuff up, you can. The biggest thing that you need to be prepared for outside of the technical questions is this first question that's almost always going to be, so tell me about yourself, or something akin to, tell me what's going on. You know, why are you here? Tell me about yourself. Tell me what makes you tick, right? Things like that. This should not just be a rundown of what's on your resume. I know a lot of people prepare an elevator pitch. This is not your elevator pitch, right? This is, give a quick professional introduction. For instance, I'm a full stack developer. I've been doing it for about 25 years. About half of that, 10 to 15 years, I've been doing Swift and Objective-C programming. I really enjoy iOS development. You know, what brought you to the job? I'm here today because I saw you guys had an opening, and I'm really excited about what HashRocket is doing in the community right now. I really like this particular product that you guys are working on, something like that. It gives you an opportunity to say, hey, I know a little bit about the company. And this isn't just one of 100 interviews that I don't care about. You can say, hey, I care about this one. Gives you an opportunity to say what excites you about technology, what brought you to be a programmer, or whatever you are, an AI enthusiast or whatever. Optionally, I like to end with something a little more personal. When I'm not at work, I like to spend time with my family, and I play a lot of board games. You know, it makes it a little more personal. It can be useful, especially, you know, if you see a picture on their desk of them holding a huge fish, and you actually like fishing, it might not be a bad idea to say, and I really enjoy deep sea fishing when I get the chance. Not something I get to do very much, but I really enjoy that. That kind of thing, it might make a connection with that particular interviewer that you otherwise wouldn't have made. You don't want it to be anything too weird or out there, and you don't want it to be anything that is obviously like not safe for work stuff, or that might make you weird. So even if you like underwater basket weaving, it might not be the best thing to bring up at this particular case. The third item, how much extra effort will the existing team need to do to support you? It's really just how much load are you going to add to or remove from the existing team? And this is going to be based, like their expectation is going to be based on your experience level. If you're coming in as a senior or a mid-level, a senior, staff, principal level, they're going to expect you to take very little time away from people that are working already, and they're going to expect you to be committing code and being productive very quickly, within a week or two, right? If you're a junior developer, they're going to expect that you're probably, you may not be committing code for the first month. You know, you're just going to be getting familiar with the code. Maybe you'll commit a few small changes, but you're not making any major changes. And a lot of the code that you're going to write is going to be scrutinized by the senior devs in your code reviews and things like that. Just expect that. They expect that. So they want to know, hey, what kind of level are you at, and how quickly are you going to be able, like, basically, how quickly are you going to be making money for us after we start paying you? Any questions, comments?
I want to maybe it's something you're getting to, but I'm interested about company research and like what that plays into the technical interview.
So I don't talk about that too much. I talked a little bit in your prepared questions. So frankly, if I'm doing the interview, now a lot of my interviews are just mock interviews, so there's not really a whole lot of opportunity for that kind of discussion. What I'm going to care about, if I'm actually going to hire you, is like, I actually personally, and not everybody is going to be this way, but personally, I care a lot more about you being excited about the job you're doing than the specific company.
Okay.
I would much rather have somebody that is gung-ho, loves writing code, that could care less about HashRocket. Now, not necessarily care less, but
I think I agree with that. I think that's on the technical side of getting to that technical interview. Do you think that's important for resume or for the initial bonus?
Just any research you can do ahead of time to get familiar with the company, what they do, I think is always beneficial.
Yes.
Even with any research, like the companies I've gone to work for, I've not only have I tried to look up whatever public information I have, I've also networked around and talked to people that either worked there or used to work there to ask them what the company culture was like, what tech stacks they're using, what are some of the problems that they have, So yeah, it's I had thankfully gotten information from doing that made me turn down jobs that I'm glad that I did not take.
And I would kind of look at that if you're actively looking for a job right now, and I know that a lot of people that are actively looking for jobs, they're putting out 100 resumes a week even. They've been looking for 6 or 8 months and they've put out 1,000 resumes, right? Those people, I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of research on a company until I get a call for an interview.
Okay. Yeah, if you already have a job, that's one thing.
Right,
If you have been out
exactly.
of work for, I have several friends that have been out of work for 6 or 7 months. I had one friend who just got a job, been out of work for 2 years. So yeah, it's in his case, it's he was just okay. It's I'll go work for you.
Right.
Yeah, so it's he has a family to feed, and so it was he really needed the job. So
And also if you are a junior dev looking for your first position, I would take anything.
oh yeah.
Whether it's in the field that you actually care about, like Caspian's a game developer, and really wants to do game development. If a .NET position came along, I would encourage him to take it, even though it's not game development. Just to get your foot in the door and get that first year of development experience. Because companies are taking the biggest risk on junior devs that don't have any work experience. Especially like right now, you talk to different people and they're like, oh yeah, the biggest problem we have is getting these Gen Zers to show up on time or whatever, you know. They said the same thing about millennials. I'm sure that the the greatest generation said the same thing about the boomers.
Yeah.
Right? But you still, like, my dad works with a lot of farms and like blue collar type work. And he said, during, like, this was like during COVID or during a time when unemployment was particularly high, he said, he's talking to people all the time and said, we can't get enough workers because we will give you a job on the spot if you can show up on time and pee clean. And the biggest problem that they had was getting people that had enough professionalism to show up at the job when you're supposed to be there and not do drugs. Show up sober,
Yeah.
And it's like, now, blue collar work may have a different group of people than professional white collar work, like programming generally is, but like it's a different culture potentially. But we see the same thing in professional work as well, where people don't show up on time or they lie to you. I hate it when people lie. When I have a junior dev that won't just tell me what they like. They're actively lying to me because they're afraid to tell me that they worked from home that morning.
Oh,
No, they're like, oh no, I was in the office. Oh really? I was in the office and I didn't see you. Stuff like that. Anyway, so I would be, if I'm to the second or third interview, I probably do care a lot more about the company. I'm going to do a bit more research about it if I have options. If I have a job and I have options, I'm going to do a lot more research because theoretically, I want to know, do I want a job at this company? A lot more than do I want a job at a company.
Got it. That sounds like something to do on the side as opposed that once you get to that second or third interview, as opposed to making it part of the interview.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And I mean, right now, like I hear from people that companies are asking for 4, 5, 6 interviews.
It's horrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
I went through that last year. Like, so I was laid off at the end of 2023, and like every like process where I got any link to whatever in the interview process, it was like minimum was, but the job I wound up taking, I had to do 5 interviews for that, and but the one that I thought that I was going to get, that I didn't get, because it was one that involved aviation. So I'll be perfect for this because I'm a software engineer. I'm also a commercial pilot, and they're doing some drones. I have a remote pilot's license. I'll be perfect because I had to do 5 interviews, and at the end, after the 5th interview, I figured they would offer me the job. They came back and said, no, we're not going to offer it to you. And I was like, why not? And they were like, well, because in the second technical interview that you did, the interviewer wanted you to do like a coding assignment. And it's like, you mean the last 5 minutes of the interview, like when I had to leave to get on to another interview, he asked me to do a coding assignment? I was like, I said, I don't have time to do it right now, but I can get back to you with it, which I actually wound up doing. But it's like, the technical interviewer says, like, oh, he didn't do the coding assignment, and they didn't offer a good job after 5 interviews.
It's like they took you to the 3rd round when that happened in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
Which is stupid.
So, I mean, and that was like 2 weeks after. So it's like I went through and I had other people that were, making offers, and and it's just like, so it's like you're just wasting people's time at that point. The good news, that's not the good news, but the good news for me, Sean Floyd, was that they wound up laying off a bunch of people after that. So it was clear to me that they were not a well-run organization.
I guess another question, let's see if I can articulate it, is my experience that the technical interview style varies a lot. Like I've been in some that it's completely leak code, essentially.
Mhm.
And that's a pass or fail. I've been in some that are completely leak code, but we don't expect you to actually complete it. We want you to articulate what it is that what your thought process is when you're working on that. And then some are, there it gets more like whiteboard styles,
Right.
where it's like talk through a design
Right.
problem.
So I talk here a little more about the coding exercise.
But
And you mentioned, 3 different approaches here. The first one where you said, here's a leak code, pass or fail, right? I would never use that. If I had any choice, I would not use that. It's possible that comes from like the HR as a screening mechanism. If they can do this, great. If they can't do it, then no. But it tells me, as somebody who cares about hiring you, it tells me absolutely nothing. It tells me you can look up that process. Even if I'm watching you do it, I could have 2 monitors and only have one of them shared.
right, you could be.
I could have a second computer that I'm typing on.
Right.
There's lots of different ways that you could get around that.
Noisy keyboard.
What's that?
Just don't have a noisy
Yeah,
keyboard.
just don't have a noisy keyboard. And you're seeing, like, I saw some articles recently that was, that style is kind of going away because there's enough, like, colleges that have basically said, just memorize everything in leak code.
Well, the leak code is a perfect example of that. Like, I probably couldn't answer like one of those leak code questions to save my life, but it's like, I've looked, there's websites you can go to where they have like, here are all the different types of like leak code questions that they might ask at like a Google or, AWS or whatever. And so, the people that are going to interview for those companies are already studied up. If they're not studied up, there's a kid that just got kicked out of Columbia that made the application that has like a layer where we can ask you the questions and then you can interact with the AI to come up with the answers during the interview without the interviewer knowing that you're using the application. So it's like, so the thing I've always tried to do when I do technical interviews is I'll generally I'll ask people specific questions about, tell me about like a problem that you recently solved and how did you solve it? What was different about your solution from what the company was trying to do or something like that. I'll specifically ask them about like something I've seen on their resume. It's like, how do you do that? Or which framework, and I can suss out pretty quickly whether or not that person, is, they've fudged their resume or, they actually have experience, doing what it is they say that they can do.
So I'm gonna basically throw out that first option as if somebody's asking you to do that, it's probably not the technical people asking you for a yes, no, can he do this leak code problem? And
It's extreme. I've
Yeah.
been in that interview before where it's like,
Right.
I think I was actually paired up with a junior, and I feel like there wasn't a conversation,
Yeah.
just like
and it
complete it.
And it
But-
could be part of the technical interview that HR said you have to do this.
Yeah.
But generally, as a general rule, the coding exercise is not about the solution, it's about the process, right? Sometimes the exercise is vague on purpose because they want you to think through the problem and ask clarifying questions. So, like, a problem that I like to throw out when dealing especially with juniors, right, is write me a quick script or function that will find all of the prime numbers between two numbers, or that will find the first 20 prime numbers, or something like that. It takes as input a low number and a high number, and it finds all of the prime numbers between them. Well, what I'm actually looking for is, okay, so if I give it a low number, is that inclusive or exclusive, right? Because I just said between these two numbers. So the vague part there is the low and high number, if the low number is 3, do I return 3? If the high number is 5, do I return 5? Things like that. I want to know, I want to know how you organize your code. Is it all one big function? Or do you write an isPrime function, and then you write another function that loops through from low to high, calls that isPrime and returns it, or something like that. Now, a lot of that I don't care exactly how you do it. I care why you did it that way. Like if I ask, so why did you choose to do it this way? That's what I'm going to ask. Like I expect them to have a thoughtful answer. The last tech interview that I remember doing, they asked, like they had something to, I don't even remember what the problem was, but it had an array in it. And they asked me, well, why did you choose, and it was in Swift, and Swift has basically collections. You have a set and you have collections. There's not a separate list and array and a bunch of different types of collections. They're just a collection. And I guess you could have a queue. There are different types of collections. But anyway, I just used an array. And he asked, so why did you choose an array here? And I said, well, that's kind of my go-to. I could use a set if I needed to because all of these items are unique. I could, but it doesn't say that all items need to be unique. So maybe I need a clarifying question there of are all of these items going to be unique? Excuse me. I could have used a queue, but there's no reason this needs to be ordered. So a queue isn't necessarily the right answer there. And in most of the time you see everything in Swift is just a collection unless it needs to be something else. Okay, so a lot of times it's, did you think about this? And did you make a thoughtful decision? Or did you just not think about it and just go, right? In addition to those kinds of questions, they want to know, they not only want to know how you solve the problem, but they also likely want to know how you interact with them to solve the problem together. Do you go and do it all yourself? Or do you work collaboratively with the interviewer to solve the problem? And it could be reasonable to ask, okay, you gave me this problem to do. Is this something that you want to work together collaboratively to solve this problem, or is this something that you want me to solve? Just so I know what we're looking for, right? The key thing in either of those scenarios is all of your thinking should be out loud. Take your internal narrative and actually say it. So when you're looking at it, say, okay, so this is supposed to be, oh, well, I'm looking for prime numbers. All right, we got a low number and a high number. Those are probably inclusive. Are those inclusive? Okay, great. Those are inclusive. So I'm obviously going to need to iterate between low and high. I know that there's some equations that I could do to really easily find out if a number is prime or not. You're probably not asking if I have that specific piece of information, which means that I'm going to loop through all the odd numbers from 3 to whatever and see if this equally divides into that. So I'm going to use a modular for that. Like you just kind of use that kind of internal, you basically speak your internal narration and all of the things you're thinking about because they want to know, what are you thinking about? How are you going to do this? Keep in mind that there's not any process that is always the best. You should talk through alternatives and why you ultimately chose the solution you did. Show some flexibility and confidence in what you're doing.
Can I confidently write code in silence?
I mean,
Once you're employed.
yes, once you're employed, you can do all of that you want.
Probably might be a little too easy if that's the case. Like, you have a problem, you're just like, okay, done.
Right.
You might ask like, is there, you got anything else for me?
I just think it's really hard to think and talk at the same time.
I personally struggle with that too. Like, usually when I'm going through this process, it takes me like at least 3 or 4 interviews before I'm actually comfortable with that process. Like that's, I'm not like an introvert, I just like going down there, just like,
Yeah.
leave me alone, let it go. But,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, I mean, I've been on the other side too, where I want to know what your thought process is, and that's
So-
really important.
What you can do there, if you're not a talker, right, and you have a hard time talking while you're thinking, you could tell the interviewer, look, I have a hard time talking while I'm thinking, but I'm gonna put my thoughts down in comments as I'm going through this. And then you comment in the code the same kind of thing. Basically say, like, it's supposed to be inclusive. Okay, I'm gonna put a comment here that says, assume low and high numbers are inclusive. Or to do, or ask, is this inclusive? You know, and then after you kind of go through it, then you can be like, okay, so I have a couple of questions, as I'm sure you saw, you know, and then you can put in some pseudocode in your comments or something like that, that is, you know, your comment of loop through from low to high and call is prime. And then you define your is prime function and things like that, you know. Put in a comment, only need to loop through to half of the number because if it's larger than half, then it's not going to be equally divisible. You know, things like that. Put that in a comment. If you have a hard time speaking while you're thinking, I would type it out. And give them a little heads up ahead of time that says, okay, look, I think better without talking, so I'm just going to throw in some comments here as we're going, and I'll ask you about those after I get through the initial process.
Right, yeah. I think
That is
I
a good idea.
really is, if you're starting off like building a function, and you feel like, okay, I'm thinking it's gonna do this, or these are the assumptions that I'm making on it, and I build it out, and any questions I could also put there as well.
Mhm.
That's great advice.
If they ask you to do something on the whiteboard, they ask you to write code on the whiteboard, most reasonable interviewers do not care that the syntax is accurate. They care about pseudocode and the logic, not that you know that the right function to call to reverse a string is string.reverse parenthesis Bob. You know, they don't care. If I'm going to reverse a string and I'm going to call the reverse function, I'm going to assume that I can just call quote Bob quote dot reverse. Now, obviously, that's the same thing either way, but we'll go Larry instead. But also, if they're asking you to reverse a string, they probably aren't asking you to use the reverse function. They're asking you to do a loop backwards. But anyway, if it's a whiteboard that they're asking you to do it, you don't have an IDE, you don't have code coloring, you don't have anything that helps you write code, most likely they don't care about pseudocode, or they don't care about the syntax itself, they care about pseudocode. And if that's the case, and you can always clarify that. Because because I'm on a whiteboard here and I don't have all the bells and whistles that an IDE gives me, I'm going to write some pseudocode. If you have questions about anything, feel free to ask. Any other? That's it. Look at that. Any other questions about? Let's see. Am I done sharing? Okay. Any other questions about tech interviews? Anything like that?
I have a question for the start about a tech interview. Is it Skype?
This is Zoom. Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious if, what it's like out there, 'cause I've been out of the job market for about, I've been employed, I should say, for the last year. So I don't know what it's like right now for, I do know they just repealed section 174, which was the tax on software engineering, which is, I don't know if you heard about that or not, but they had a tax, it went into effect a couple of years ago that essentially put a tax on software engineering. So for instance, if you were a company and you were doing, let's say, a lot of R&D development, as an example, you had to pay the taxes on that, even though you hadn't earned any money on it. So it's a huge disincentive for,
There's,
startups and,
yeah, I know that there's been, like, I'm a contractor, a consultant, and I work for a client. I know that that client tracks development time separately from meetings, because development time is capital,
yeah,
it is a capital expenditure, and meetings are, whatever the other one is.
What's the Zoom ID?
There should just be a link if you go to Meetup. Okay. I'll disclose it to you.
yeah. So, and the two things have been bad for software engineering, specifically like people that are trying to start companies. One has been that tax law, which was just repealed. But there's also, interest rates. Interest rates have been, a lot higher. Like, when interest rates are like 2%, then like it makes a lot of sense to put money into like a startup company because your chance of return is, big. But if you can get, 10% on, or 5% for like a 2-year, treasury note, it's like, well, I'll just go with the treasury note.
Right.
So
That doesn't have the risk associated with it.
that's true. Sure, yeah. So because most startup companies fail. So, but when they do, or when they are successful, they generally have big returns. So I don't know what it's like right now for hiring. I just know that when I was in the market a year and a half ago, it was horrifically bad.
So my belief, whether it's accurate or not,
Yeah.
is there have been a lot of layoffs in the past several years, of very large layoffs at Google, Microsoft, Meta, things like that, which means there's a lot of people out of work. Now, a lot of those people probably got decent severance for 6, 8, 12 months. I have no idea. I'm guessing. But for several, you got 4 months?
I got 4 months, yeah.
So probably getting decent severance, and probably started looking for a job, not immediately. So you wait 6 months, and now they're starting to look for a job, which means the market is flooded with people looking for jobs who have worked at Google, Meta, Microsoft. And personally, I've always thought that the FANG companies,
Yes.
I've always thought that they overpay their people anyway, which means you have all of these people that are looking for $300,000 senior developer positions, and they just don't exist.
Yeah, the other thing too is that,
Especially if you have like 7 years of experience, you're not making $300,000 writing code if you've got less than 10 years of experience.
So
Probably less than 25.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was gonna say, my previous company that I was laid off from, they were based in Silicon Valley, and when I got hired by them, initially everybody was working remote because it was COVID. And then eventually they started opening up the office, where they want people to come in 3 days a week, and they changed the rules. Like if you lived within 50 miles of one of the offices, you had to come in, at least 3 days a week. And then they got to the point where they just laid off all the remote people. So I was one of the remote people. I was working here in Jacksonville, and so we had really talented people that were overseas, like in Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, and so I let them all go on the same day. The same day I got let go. So, but yeah, it's I know that with Microsoft recently, they just laid off 9,000 people. So, and they just laid off I think 6,000 people maybe a month or two prior to that. So.
And you combine that with, at least I know more about the consulting market.
Yeah.
But I worked for 2 different small consulting firms in the past 5 years, 6 years, and I was at Atomic Robot when we moved here to to Florida.
Mhm.
And they did really well through COVID because one of their major clients, one of their big clients was Kroger,
Ah, yeah.
you know. But then after COVID, like people stopped buying, people stopped paying for development, you know. I think that there's a combination there of they were focused mainly on mobile app development. And I think that a lot of companies have internal app development now, whereas 5 years ago, 10 years ago, all of that was contracted out. But also, like lots of people were happy to talk about projects they wanted to do, but didn't want to sign,
Mhm.
didn't want to actually pay for it yet. A lot of them were waiting for the economy to improve before they spent money on
Yeah.
projects. And the company I work for now, Caliberty, is they had similarly a couple of really bad years, mainly because nobody was buying consulting services. They weren't starting new projects. They were cutting back on the projects they were doing. So it seems like things are picking up quite a bit now.
That's good to hear.
We're hiring a .NET developer, if somebody's looking for that, and an AI developer. So if you're looking for work,
I'm not presently looking for it, but I do .NET and AI development, so.
but we're currently looking for 2 developers. One's an AI developer, one's a .NET developer. Also looking for an account manager, sales thing. Probably not anybody in this room, but if you know anybody, feel free to reach out. And David, if you're actually interested in applying, I can share that information.
I appreciate the offer, but I'm at the point now where the job that I have is I only have to be in the office 1 day a week, and I just work from home. I just got a fiber connection at home, so
Caliberty is fully remote.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
You got something you wanna share?
I can take a smack at it. I did this let me share. I am a game developer, and I did this talk a while ago, and it's basically just an intro to game development and what you need to get started making games, basically. So first off, a little bit about me. I am a self-taught game developer. I've done C# and GDScript. GDScript is a programming language specifically for Godot, which is a game engine. I've been programming since August of 2023. I specialize in Godot and Unity. I have released, well, it's more than 3 games now, but it was 3 at the time. And some of my favorite games are Jedi Survivor, Portal series, and Red Hat 2. So why do you want to make games? Maybe you're an artist who wants to make your art come to life. Or maybe you're a programmer who wants a challenge. Or maybe you're a writer who wants to write a commentary on the current political situation. Games reach a different audience, and they'll reach different people. So that political commentary will reach gamers as opposed to people who watch movies. Personally, for me, I like creating games for fun. So they're a creative outlet for me. The image on the screen right now is a picture from my game on Steam called Moonspire. First things first, you're going to need an idea. An idea is just what your game is going to be about. There are tons of game genres, as you can see, coming down so many, it goes off the bottom of the screen. platformers like Mario and Sonic, first-person shooters, Call of Duty, and Halo, roguelites. They're all genres that have specific types of mechanics. So platformer, you're generally going from point A to point B through an obstacle course. First-person shooters, you're generally shooting targets. Roguelike is kind of there's a debate behind what a roguelike actually is, but the main thing about a roguelike is it has random items, and it's hold on, my brain's leaving. It's got random generation, and it's run-based, so when you lose, then you have to start over from the beginning. And games don't necessarily have to fall into one genre, because Jedi Survivor is a Souls-like. Souls-like is a timing-based combat system with a dodge roll mechanic. And a platformer. Portal is a first-person shooter puzzle game, and Getting Over It is a rage platformer. The cat picture is a joke, because I originally had these come on one at a time. So it would be platformer and then first-person shooter, and it'd be all that. And it's like, there's so many, I'm just going to give you a break. Here's my cat. Well, my sister's cat. You're going to need a design document. It's best to have an idea of where you want to go with your game. So your design document contains ideas, concept art, technologies you're going to use, what engine you're planning to use, inspirations, and specific algorithms you might want to use for procedural generation. It's a living document, which means you're going to, it's not set in stone. So they're more like what we call guidelines, basically. So you want to stick to it as a general idea of where your game should go. But it's a living document, so it can change, and that's important because you want to follow the fun. Follow the fun is a game design idea where when you're making your game and it's crap, then you iterate it again and do something that's more fun. Something, Ape Out, which is the picture on the top. Ape Out was a stealth game, but when you were found, then you get to beat the guards up. And when the guards and the developer decided that, you know what, it's actually more fun to just beat up the guards. So he switched it up to just be it's a beat 'em up. Also into the breach, which is on the bottom. The team found out, like one specific enemy was, it told you your next move, and the team liked it so much, so they made the entire game that. To make a game, you're going to need an engine, though. So what is an engine? An engine is what does the rudimentary logic. So it's what makes the images appear on the screen. It calculates the physics. It explores the file system. And it's basically what your game needs to be played. You can make your own, but there are also pre-made engines, and I'll get to that on the next slide. Editors help developers to do dev things like editing the game world. So you're going to need, if you're making a 3D game like Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess or something, to design that, to design the dungeons, you're going to need to be able to place 3D objects, and that's going to be a lot easier in a 3D environment than manually placing them in code. Essentially, an engine is the thing that makes the game tick. That's important. It's the thing that it performs the logic every frame. So when you press the go button, it tells the game, it tells the sprite to move to the right, or to move to the left, or attack, or whatever. Choosing an engine. There are a lot of engines. There's Unity, Unreal, Godot, Source. There's so many that I gave another picture of my sister's cat. Generally, the top three are Unity, Unreal, and Godot. Unity uses C#. Godot uses C# and GDScript, and Unreal is usually C++.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Go ahead.
So, I've never played around with Roblox, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. I don't know if you had
I
a
haven't
chance.
used Roblox.
Okay.
It uses Lua.
That's what Angry Birds was your thing.
Oh, really?
But C# for Godot and Unity.
C# for Godot and Unity. I originally learned C# to, actually the real reason I learned C# was to edit an open source project. And then I found out that Unity uses C#, so I decided that I would rather use C# than the open source project. The open source project was basically a, what's it called? RPG Maker clone. Where you would make an MMORPG, but I wanted to use it for a single player game, and that wasn't what it was designed for. So it's actually a lot easier to use Unity to make your own thing than work off somebody else's pre-structured stuff.
So, you know, if I ask another question related to that. So, I know like maybe about a year or 2 years ago, there was a big kind of kerfuffle. Like, a lot of Unity developers left Unity for Godot because I believe Unity changed their pricing or their licensing model.
I am one of those people.
Okay, so you made the switch. So you were started off in
I started off with Unity and then I
switched
switched to Godot. I like Godot so much that I never went back.
Okay.
Because Unity said, hey, we're gonna change our pricing model, and everybody left, and Unity's like, no, we were just kidding.
That's essentially what they did, yeah.
And from what I've seen of GDScript, it's very JavaScript TypeScripty.
I've heard,
It's a similar
I haven't-
syntax and context.
I haven't heard that.
Really?
I'm always told that it's more similar to Python.
It's tab-based. I think it's a tab-based
It is tab-based.
thing, but and I'm more familiar with TypeScript than Python, but just the way that it executes seems very TypeScripty to me.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of languages that have been inspired by JavaScript. So like I used to do a long time ago, I used to do Cold Fusion, and they came up with something called CFScript, which is just a clone of JavaScript. It works almost exactly the same as JavaScript. So. Yep.
Unity is indie. Indie is independent, and AAA is like you've got indie studios and AAA studios. AAA studios are games like Call of Duty, which are made by big companies to make a profit. And indie studios, they make games to make money, but they're more. To me, they're more like they make games because they love making games, and making money off of it is a bonus. That's probably not the reason, but it's independent. Unity is used by both AAA and independent studios. Hollow Knight is an indie game, and Fall Guys is a AAA game. Both of them use Unity. Unreal is in C++. They also have a drag and drop system. I have tried C++ and I hated every minute of it. I have not tried their drag and drop system, but it's mainly used by AAA studios like EA. EA makes Jedi Survivor, and a more indie studio used it for Red Out 2.
Who does, I'm trying to think of the name, it's kind of like a first-person shooter, but it's, I'm trying to remember, Tim Sweeney, the guy, I think he's behind, he did the Unreal tournament and all that. He has a company, I think, they have, I don't know if they own Unreal or not, but
Unreal is Epic Games.
that's it, yes.
It's the Fortnite engine.
That's it. Fortnite was the game I was trying to think of. So my understanding is that they have they developed their own programming language that's similar to like a functional programming language.
I don't know
like
anything
OCaml
about
or
this.
something. Yeah, that's what I heard. I haven't seen it or tried to play around with it, but
Godot is very indie. I don't think there was one AAA studio that used Godot, but we don't talk about them because the game sucked.
It wasn't Godot's fault.
It wasn't Godot's fault, no. It was a Sonic game. It has built-in C# support, but I prefer using GD script with it. It's mainly because the C# doesn't have an export for a web build. So you can upload your games to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, C#, you can export to WebAssembly, which you can
Godot doesn't do it.
Godot doesn't use that feature.
Godot. So from what I understand, the Godot is open source, and the open source developers made a bet on the wrong web system. They expected some system to go standard, and then it didn't. So they built their backbone on Godot 4 around that, and now they have to completely rewrite the system to for Godot 4.
And something from helping Caspian with some of his projects, something that has been challenging for me as an experienced developer is using these engines. Your front-end code and back-end code is very tightly coupled, and it's annoying. For somebody that's so used to everything being, loosely coupled.
Yeah.
Highly cohesive and loosely coupled. That's the object-oriented way, right? And
Is somebody's alarm going off?
I'm sorry?
I think somebody's alarm is going off.
No, not me.
must be someone else.
You've got better hearing than I do.
I hear it.
He's the young one in the room.
It's not mine.
Oh, it is mine. Look at that. Wow. I was right next to it and didn't hear it. One of the things that he and I have talked about a lot is, okay, how can we take this logic and separate it from the front end? So you can reuse that logic elsewhere. It's just super hard to do.
Those are what we call components.
But the components are still tied to the front end.
Components are still tied to the front end, yes.
So you can still do component development, yes. We all are familiar with that.
Unity is component based. Godot is node based.
And a node is
A node is kind of like Godot is way more tree. Like everything in Godot, every object has one script on it. In Unity, the same object can have multiple scripts on it.
Okay.
Other engines include Source, which is Valve, which is Steam. Their games are Half-Life and Portal, Team Fortress 2. They all use the Source engine. Recently, the Source engine, Team Fortress 2 was open source. You can write games with the Source engine. I'm not familiar with MacroQuad. Roblox is it uses Lua and GameMaker. I believe it uses its own programming language. If you don't want to, if you can also make your own engine, both indie studios and AAA studios have done this. Unreal was a custom engine for
Until
Fortnite. Yeah, until recent was was a custom engine until Fortnite. In-house engines are custom engines. Some games that are have a custom engine are Fez, and Factorio actually has its own custom engine. You can mod Factorio with Lua, which is fun.
And if you guys are familiar with Factorio, first of all, it's a great game. But secondly, they have a designer and developer diary that they list, or they do posts on their website blog. I don't know that it's every Friday, but frequently. And they sometimes get really into the weeds about pathfinding or noise creation in the levels and things like that. So it's really interesting if you're interested in those kinds of things.
Well, I used to read John Carmack's .plan files. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but back in the day, like in software, like when they were working on a new version of Quake or Doom or something like that, John Carmack would write about like some of the engineering problems that he ran across and how he solved the problems. And it was like really kind of pre-blog. And he was essentially was blogging before there was blogs. And he would talk about all the stuff that he was having problems with. And I find him to be like probably one of the brightest computer programmers that's living. But he's doing AI now. He's not doing game development anymore. But yeah, it's like he would talk a lot about like how he was dealing with like memory issues, like buffer overrun, things like that. How he solved like certain like floating point issues. Like he used like there's a kind of beginner's trick he used for getting the square root, which is not like the standard way of getting a square root, but it's like a hack where if you know exactly what function to call on Intel processors, it will give you something that's at least close.
It's close enough
Close enough for game development, yeah.
for that one tick that's going to be gone.
Yeah, so
40th of a second.
that kind of leads me to another question was that I know like I don't know if any other game developers are doing this, but I know that like one of the things Id was famous for was that they would come out with a game and then they would take the engine that they had used to build the game and they would license that to other companies. And then after a couple of years, they would just take it and just open source it. So like all of like the original like Doom source, it's over 30 years old now, but they open source that and it's been ported to like
Your toaster.
your toaster, exactly. Like I'll run your refrigerator.
You shared something. We're playing Doom something.
But are there
I recently saw somebody put Doom on an exercise bike.
Right?
You can also you can find ASCII
If it
code,
has-
I think.
If it has a 2D screen of any sort, somebody will try to put Doom on it.
But are there other companies that are doing that, like with their engines? Or?
Essentially, that's what Unreal does.
Yeah.
Or Epic licenses their. It's not open source, so they license their engine to anybody. EA, which is a big AAA studio, uses Unreal a lot. There's also some indie devs that use it. I don't know if there's different pricing based on whether you're indie or AAA. Unity also does that, but they recently released their first game. So they had been just an engine until recently. I don't know what their first game is, but I think it was made for the Switch too.
Okay.
So yes, companies do license out their engines. I'd like to say especially Unreal. Godot is open source, so it's free license. You can do whatever you want with it, and I think it's great because there's basically you don't have to worry about companies somebody coming and saying, hey, your game made such and such amount of money. We're going to take 10% of that. Which is oh, go ahead.
Is Godot corporately backed?
What does that mean?
Is there money behind it?
In other words, yeah, is there a company that sponsors it?
Yes, there are sponsors.
Okay.
Um,
Because a lot of open source projects like Twitter started Bootstrap, was it?
Yeah, Bootstrap was originally,
You know,
the name was Bootstrap.
yeah, and I think Facebook has their own libraries as well, but basically the libraries themselves are open source.
Godot was made originally as an open source engine by some guy in Argentina.
But when it's corporately backed, it provides some stability to say it's gonna be around for a long time.
Yeah.
Because somebody's paying to
on their
upkeep the code.
on the Godot webpage, they've got sponsors at the bottom.
So people paying for it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to create your own engine if the available engines do not provide features your game requires. For example, Fez came around before Unity was, and they needed a 2D, 3D system. Basically, Fez is a 2D platformer, but it can turn 3D. So if you've got if your world's like this, you're traveling up along this side, and then the world turns up to like that, and now you're traveling on this side. So it turns like that. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it. So that's an example of why you might want a custom engine. When you're getting started, I would generally recommend choosing an engine with a language you are familiar with. So if you know C#, then I'd recommend Godot or Unity. If you know C++, I'd recommend Unreal. Godot has community support for other languages, and there's Pygame, there's Love2D, there's Roblox uses Lua, as I've said before. There's tons of engines, and you'll likely be able to find something. So how do you start making games? The first thing you do is jump right in. You've gotten your engine. Now you just need to read the documentation and learn how to use the language within the engine. This is the hardest thing about making games, in my opinion. Learning a new environment for a language you already know. Documentation is your friend. Tutorials are your friend. The biggest thing, the best advice, or the advice I like to give most is, unless it's otherwise prohibited, such as being a university project, it is not cheating to Google your problem. If you're stuck, look it up. I say that with a caveat because if you look it up every single time, then you may run the risk of falling into tutorial hell. Tutorial hell is when you become so reliant on tutorials that you can't create an original solution. That means that if you want to move a character left and right on the screen, you can't because it's not in your brain, you've always looked it up. You might say you Google coded it instead of similar to vibe code, you Google coded it. So if you run into a problem, try to solve it yourself with what you already know before looking it up. But if you are absolutely stuck on it, do look it up because that's the only way you're going to learn how to do it. Don't end up like this guy. If you remember to learn and not be a parrot, you're well on your way to making your first game. Startup projects are a good thing. I ignored this advice. Do I wish I had followed this advice? Not particularly. So you can ignore this advice if you want to, but it is good to have a starter project. A starter project gives a sense of what making games is going to be like, and it helps avoid tech debt. I was talking about tech debt earlier. Tech debt, I have a definition here. It says, tech debt is a piece of code that is disorganized or hard to maintain. All programs have some amount of tech debt, but it's when there's a lot of it when it gets hard. So over the years, I have learned that you want to organize your environment. If your environment is disorganized, it makes for an unmaintainable code base, and your project will become so cluttered that you won't want to work on it anymore, or it will just be you won't be able to work on it because it's a bunch of spaghetti layered on top of spaghetti. So yeah, examples of startup projects are like Flappy Bird, Mario Clone, Space Invaders, Snake. Basically, a simple thing that lets you learn how to use the engine without going overboard. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. Your last comment about Snake. When I was learning JavaScript, like probably over a decade ago, that was one of the things that I picked up was I learned about the canvas utility. JavaScript
yes.
for writing a Snake.
My favorite is asteroids, like
Asteroids.
a bunch of different versions of asteroids that run inside of the canvas.
Oh, it's not sure. Okay.
If I remember Easter eggs, like people leave like Easter eggs in their application, and I used to have one on websites where they're full of a game of asteroids, but back in the day, it was I think I had the original one I had was a Java applet that loaded up inside of it. So it's not really a thing anymore. I don't think if you wanted to, I don't think you could load up a Java applet on a web page anymore.
Probably not, because there was so many security concerns with it.
Oh yeah.
And so much confusion, because people would be like, oh, you have to disable Java. Oh, I have to disable JavaScript? No, just Java. Disable JavaScript, things will stop working.
Okay, well, I'm probably gonna wrap this up. It's 8:30. Where did we go? Well, any questions for anyone on tonight's topics? All
I
right.
think we covered them while the talk was going.
Yeah, that was good. Appreciate everyone who presented tonight.